We be live.
Hey.
Hey, Susanna has a little bit of a delay for me because she's speaking from I don't know where. She seems like she's been held captive in this new room. I don't know where she is, but
What?
but I don't know. She has bad connections. She's like underground or somewhere. But I hear echo when I'm speaking. Testing. Oh no, she's muted now, so I'm not gonna hear that echo. Unmute yourself. Testing. Yeah, I hear echo. Does anyone else hear echo? If not, it's okay. Anyways, that's fine. Just letting you know ahead of time in case I ask something and Susanna takes around 3 seconds to respond. That's because there are some connection issues. We're going to answer questions in the live chat. However, before we answer questions in the live chat, we have to answer our Patreon questions. So for people who don't know, when we have an Ask Us Anything live stream, we first post it on Patreon. We don't first. We'll post it on Patreon, and our patrons get to ask their questions there as a comment, so that anybody who's not, who can join us live gets to be, if they want their questions to be answered, even if they're not live with us, they could do so as a patron, right? So these are people who might be posting their questions as a patron because they want their questions to be answered first, or because they can't be here and they want to make sure we answer their questions. So we'll answer.
And also, because we are demonetized and we can't do super chats, it's a good way to make sure your questions get asked.
Yeah, it's actually a very good way of just, yeah, I'm thinking, yeah.
So I'm just going to load up the questions as we go.
Yes. So we're going to answer the Patreon questions, and right after that, we're going to go to the live chat questions. And yeah, if you guys want to make sure your questions are answered, or that your questions are answered first, or that your questions are answered even if you can't join us live, then consider becoming a patron. There's so many different benefits for being a patron. Like we have
you can be a patron for as little as $1 a month.
Yes. I mean, I'm not even
emphasize that more.
Yes, we should. You're right. That's why you're the CEO. All right. So the first Patreon question. So we have Patreon questions from Secular Proton, from AGA, from Dolly, and from D. Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
We got a lot. So let's get into it.
All right. Let's get into
it. First one from Secular Proton is: should the institution of marriage exist? And should polygamy be allowed? And the condition of that being assuming both genders can participate in it, not just men. Yes and yes for me. I have certain concerns. Well, I think technically polygamy, the word itself, may actually be, by definition, men married multiple women. I think it's something else for when it's a woman marrying multiple men. Anyways, I do have certain concerns about the legality of polygamy, just because I think there are a lot of, this is very US centric, fundamentalist religious groups who practice polygamy where it can be a very abusive practice. So I would want to try to think of a way to ensure that that would not be abused in some capacity. I'm not sure what that would look like, but I do have a slight hesitation there. But yes, I definitely think the institution of marriage should exist. I think civil marriage, the conception of civil marriage as a secular achievement, should be maintained. I think I actually have kind of slightly conservative views on this. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. Mainly just because I'm very focused on the legal protections and rights that are ensured to spouses. I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think that marriage should be expanded. I think the utility of marriage is for you to be able to signal to the government and to the legal system that certain person is now within your family, and that person has now the relationship with you is now different than other people, and that they should have certain legal rights, certain protections, certain accessibility to you. And I think that you should be, so that's the utility. I know the history of marriage was something else. The history of marriage was like, I own you now and I get to have sex with you no matter what you say. But I didn't say that. That was like, I'm just talking about the history of what marriage was. But now it has utility. It has a different meaning and a different utility. And I think that utility should be expanded to not just people who are, couples. It should be like, I don't know, there should be some limitations, but it should be any two people, or not two people, any 4 or 5 people, even if they're not having sex with each other, even if they're not a couple. I think like I think the idea of people who you have some blood relationship with, all of a sudden they have certain legal rights, and then I think it should be by, I mean, that is just like, I think, very traditional way of looking at the world. Like, why does this person who happens to be my brother or sister has certain rights, with relationship to me, and this person that I feel closer to, maybe as a couple or a brother or a sister, doesn't? Like, I think this whole concept, this whole concept of being able to bring somebody into your circle as your family member, should be expanded to beyond just marriage. It should be, there should be some cost associated with it, because people shouldn't be able to just play with it just willy-nilly. I don't know exactly how it's done. I don't know. The world is not ready for it. I think like people should be able to be like, us five now, we're a family now. Legally, we're a family now. Not just like family as in we're like, feel like a family. We're just a family. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I see the utility of marriage, and I just want to expand on it to more than just two people who seem to be like couples. I think like in the future, people should be able to be free to determine who's their family legally, and give those rights to those people beyond just husband and wife. And it should be more, that should be more important than me having a blood relationship with somebody like brother or sister. Go on.
So you're kind of like talking about being able to make someone's chosen family actually have legal abilities, like towards maybe your medical procedures and stuff, or decision making. How would
Inheritance, decision making, medical.
How would just this general configuration of, oh, my chosen family, how would this, like, my chosen family be distinguished from an actual marriage situation? Because there are different rights from a spouse versus kinship.
I think marriage should just be replaced with like, I think the marriage today is just like one contract right now. Like, it seems like one legal agreement. I just think like this is just too unflexible. I just think like there should be like, I don't know, 20 different kinds of legal relationships you want to have with family members, and you could choose, like I have 6.
I'm confused. This seems very complicated.
Well, I mean, it's just more freedom. I just feel like, to the person A, I want to give the rights to, medical, blah, blah, this and this and that. To person B, I want to have like this kind of legal relationship with. To person A, it's a 5-year thing and it will expire within 5 years. Person B is a 10-year thing and it will expire unless we renew it in 10 years. Like, I just think like it's just more freedom because you have more options, and you could, play around with it more. And, I just think like just having this one thing that we call marriage that was based on, the reason why we didn't throw it away is not because the tradition that it came from had utility. It's because we changed it to something else that has legal utility right now. I just think like we could continue changing it even more to just create relationship that's legal relationships with people who are special to us in our lives, that is just based on utility rather than something that has traditional sentimental value to us, right? And I don't think, I'm not saying we're ready for that right now. I don't think like there's like the infrastructure and the emotional, I don't think society is there right now at all. I just think like if we're just looking at it from purely a utilitarian perspective, that's where we should be heading. And I think like eventually maybe like you could even make it automatic and put it on blockchain. I don't know.
I'm having flashbacks to you having a rant about marriage on the blockchain.
No.
Like, we're working each other.
No, I just think like I'm just, you know, when it comes to you finding somebody special in your life, it could be special for many different reasons, right? And you know, the legal mumbo jumbo does not make your relationship with them more or less significant. The legal mumbo jumbo is just so that that person does not, you and that person do not have legal barriers between you, right?
Mhm.
So it's not the like, for example, what the utility, it's like some people, I don't believe in marriage. If you want to be with somebody, just be with somebody. Well, the person that you want to be with through marriage, now there's some legal barriers between you that is removed. You know, that in times of crisis you might need those legal barriers removed, right? So there is some utility to marriage. It's not just like a traditional thing. But I'm just saying, like, why do we have that only through marriage? That should, like, what is this, like, why is this connected to this traditional historical thing that we're not separating it from? Everybody should, like, this should be accessible to people, like, maybe that they don't even feel like they're couples. Maybe two people just feel so close that they just feel like two sisters, you know what I mean? And they just want to be with each other forever, and they're not even remotely attracted to each other, but they just find each other special, and they just want to be a family together, right? Like, why is this only like this utility of this kind of legal barriers being removed should be available to in so many different other ways? That's what I think.
Okay, so this like new kinship wouldn't have a distinction above what we now call marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, for everyone in the live chat, I would ask your questions after we get through the patron questions, because otherwise I'm going to it's going to be a while. So I'm going to miss your question. So ask it again when we say we're done with patron questions. The next patron question is again from Secular Proton, saying, did colonization actually make things worse? We can't tell for sure what would have happened if, for instance, India weren't colonized. Of course, we should criticize colonization, but confidently claiming India and maybe other countries is now poor because of our colonial history seems anti-intellectual? ? Well, the first question is very unclear to me. Did colonization make things worse? That's not specific enough for me. Things, what does that mean? Like the material conditions of the people who now live in a specific nation state? Like, is that what you mean? The distribution of, you know, resources around the globe and the inequality of how, you know, that is spread throughout the world? Like, what? It's without more clarity, it's hard for me to answer this question. If we can't tell for sure what would have happened if India weren't colonized, and we should criticize colonization, but confidently claiming India and maybe other countries is now poor because of our colonial history seems anti-intellectual. Well, I mean, across the globe, I mean, it's not even necessarily colonization. Like, there have always been invasions. You know, that's just, this is kind of, yeah, I need more specificity. Armin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Make things worse, which depends on which things. I'm pretty sure colonization made things better and worse depending on what specifically you're talking about. There are many things that I'm pretty sure that we could point to India that was like, oh, this is actually an improvement, and it happened because of the British Empire. So, and it's now India is better off with it. And there are many things that you could point out, like, oh yeah, this is horrible. And it is because of the British Empire, and this is horrible, and this is like a legacy of the influence of British Empire that is, you know, that is a negative, right? So I'm sure you're going to be able to find examples of both, a lot of them.
I think-
How do you measure the net effect? It's impossible, right? Especially because you don't know what would happen if it didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, it's impossible for you to be able to, like, so when you look at like history and society and sociology as a whole, there is no way for you to do an A/B analysis, right? There is no way for you to be like, okay, let's check out India with British Empire. Okay, now let's run the test again.
There are no controls in history.
Yeah, let's run the test again and keep all the other factors exactly the same, but this time without the British Empire. Okay, like, let's see what happens. Like, you can't do that, right? So, just to be able to come up with an overall net effect of positive and negative is like usually very hard, unless it was like something that was completely atrocious. I mean, even then, I don't know. Like, I'm not going to give you examples because it will come off as insensitive. But you never know what would have happened. Otherwise, like, things might have been a lot worse or a lot better, even if you can't imagine a lot worse. What you can do, instead of like coming up with like such a general, like, are things better or things worse? What things? Maybe you could like talk about specific influences in a specific area. Be like, in this specific area, we don't know what things would have been otherwise, but this is a negative influence that we could have done without, right? Or this was a positive influence that I just think like a lot of people think in black and white. They just want to come up with a very basic judgment of something as good or bad, right? And sometimes you are actually able to do that if there is like some meta-analysis on something and everything is like so many different people are analyzing in a different way and they're able to control for different factors. And even then they come up with some skepticism and be like, we think, like, they come up with a conclusion. But as far as I know it, something as big as multifactorial as the influence of an entire control of a government over a certain land, and the influences they had, and comparing that to other people, they're not, it's just impossible. The number of factors are very difficult to control for all, and also even if you could control for other factors, removing that, you don't know what it would have been replaced with, right? So let's say, for example, something 1,000 times worse than the British Empire was ruling over India, right? 1,000 times worse.
I would rather be ruled over by the British Empire than a couple of other empires, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, but even if you can, again, I'm not going to give examples because it's going to come off as insensitive. But you even in the worst examples of history, you don't exactly know what would have happened if that didn't happen. I'm not saying you should be grateful for it. I'm just saying that it's easier to just say this specific action here was a bad idea and had a negative influence, right? That is easier to do rather than coming up with an overall judgment on something. I think I already explained.
Cool. So our next question is from AGA. She is asking, Armin, does Atheist Republic have something special planned to commemorate Sexy Kali Day? Official day, by the way, because I said so. If you don't know, that is September 3rd. Is Sexy Kali Day. Maybe a new delicious #Sexy Kali art from blasphemousheart.com, perhaps. Or will there be something more epic planned? I don't want the surprise to be ruined with details, just an answer of yes or no. I think that's a good idea.
I have a serious problem with this question. Why does this question start with Armin does Atheist Republic have, given that Susanna is Atheist Republic CEO? It should have been. So I don't know, AJ. So I think AJ is being sexist. She just assumes that given that I'm the man here, I'm in charge. So I think we just learned something about AJ. I'm just kidding.
Nah, I think it's because it was because of your it was your blasphemy. To be fair, Sexy Kali is your girlfriend.
I'm kidding.
Are you still together? Are you still going strong?
No, but it was No, it was mutual.
It was mutual.
It was good. It was good. Like we were no hard feelings. No, like it was like it wasn't that it was no hard feelings. We just both like wanted to explore other people.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, she's a goddess. She can't hold her to one person, obviously.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, how could we expect otherwise? I'm just gonna leave it at
and
that.
to a mere mortal at that, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
exactly. So the next question is from Dolly, and she kind of had a little preface that I'm going to include, and it's 2 questions. I believe that the situation between the Israel and the U.S. is not good, and from what is in the news, aka Arabic news, is that Israel is in a very critical situation. So my first question is anti-Semitism rising in the U.S. and why? And then my second question is, what is your opinion about the current situation between U.S. and Israel? So I'm not sure what you mean by Israel's in a critical situation. Like that could be any number of things. Also, just in terms of your first question, like anti-Semitism is separate from Israel, right? Like it's an attitude, and Israel is a nation state where people who may be victims of that attitude can find refuge. But that's a side point. The answer is yes, anti-Semitism is rising in the United States. I did, in preparation for your question, a little bit of research. And so this is from, this was published in April. So this was published in the end of April, and this is from Israel Hayom. And it says, according to the FBI, the FBI recently released its hate crime statistics report, highlighting troubling trends related to hate crimes against Jews. According to the report, Jewish people were the targets of over 60% of religious bias-related hate crimes. Jews were targeted at a significantly higher rate than any other religious group. This data indicates an increase of 41% since 2015. Over the past decade, hate crimes targeting Jews topped the charts every year, with rates ranging from 52% to 67% of the total religious bias crimes. And it should be noted that the FBI doesn't include these crimes targeting Jewish people under the racial, ethnicity, or ancestry bias categories, and it's only listed as a religiously based hate group. Just important distinction to make. The why is difficult to get at. It's very difficult to get at. We've saw in particular with the war between Israel and Gaza over the past few months, a stark rise in hate crimes towards the Jewish community. Really bad, like the worst we've seen in years. And ironically, these people who are committing these anti-Semitic attacks are actually like validating the existence of Israel in a way, because, more Jewish people are saying, maybe I would have to move to Israel to be safe because of my identity, The why is very difficult to get at. I think bottom line, it's like a collectivist hatred and guilt by association. So they're like holding a community responsible for things that they maybe have some conspiratorial belief about what this group maybe is in control of. It's very difficult. And it's also, especially in America, very tricky to talk about the communities that are committing these crimes.
Yeah, and I think like one has nothing to do with each other. I just want to ask Dolly, why does she think like anti-Semitism in the United States has nothing to do with United States policy when it comes to the relationship with Israel's government? Like, do you really think like the Democrats are going to be like, let's appeal to our anti-Semitic demographic by hurting our relationship with Israel? Because there seems to be some demand for, like, obviously, like it's completely like irrelevant, well, in fact, if anything, it would probably, if anti-Semitic views increase in the United States, it's probably going to make the United States government want to compensate by doing more. This is why we need Israel kind of stuff, right? So yeah, one has nothing to do with the other. also the United States. I mean, I don't know what you mean again when you say Israel is in a very critical situation. Israel has. When has Israel? No, go back to the first one. When has Israel not been in a critical situation?
Constantly
Israel,
under existential threat since
Israel,
its existence.
Yeah, Israel has been. Well, you just said it. I was going to say it, but you just said it. Yeah, that's a very by. It's surrounded by hostile countries, by groups of people constantly like wishing its demise and wishing more than the end of the country, things that I can't even say right now because YouTube might think we're saying it. But in fact, Israel has been in less of a critical situation now than most of its history. So I don't know what you're talking about. You're listening to Egyptian news. There's your problem. That's probably what you're talking about. I mean, Israel is also, by the way, still in critical, not in the same nature of like critical situation that it used to be, but still is because of demographic issues and the way the second and third class citizenship that people are dealing with, and the nature of what the country is going to be, and the influence of religion and stuff like that. So, and those critical situations, that there are many things they could refer to as critical in Israel, but none of them has to do with their relationship with the U.S. because, in fact, U.S. is a stabilizing source of influence for Israel. It has always been, well, not always, it has often been, and it continues to be today. And in fact, things could be a lot better. Could be, we don't know, with the current administration in Israel, because Netanyahu was a lot closer to Republicans than to them with Democrats. So it was very convenient for Israel to have now administration without Netanyahu at the head of it, to make it an excuse for the United States to build closer relationship with. In fact, the Biden administration and the new Israel administration have recently been a lot more cooperative and united when it comes to intelligence and operations when it comes to Iran. The seemingly hostile relationship and the tension regards to the nuclear deal between the Iran's nuclear deal that existed, the disagreements that existed between Netanyahu and the Democrats doesn't seem to exist within the new Israel's administration and the Biden administration. The new Israel's administration seems to understand that this is something that the Biden administration has to push for, and they understand it, and they're just trying to work with the Biden administration to how to maneuver around it, whether it happens or not, and just continue to have good relationship with and go forward with that. The critical situation with if you're talking about a critical situation with this current government, that exists because of how unstable right now this new government is when it comes to the fact that losing one seat means the whole thing will break apart, and the fact that there is a coalition of parties that agree with each other on almost nothing. That could actually be nothing other than we need to keep Netanyahu out. Okay, that could be a source of instability, but surprisingly, it could also, in some weird ways, be a source of stability because they know how fragile they are. So they might not do things that will make them fight each other because they are all afraid of Netanyahu coming back. So they might keep everything stable just so that it doesn't become an excuse for them to fight over with each other, right? So they might not want to rock the boat too much because everything is now it's a house of cards, and they're just like, we need to keep the thing stable or else Netanyahu is going to come and replace us again. So there's that. But yeah. What do you want to say?
Well, you kind of already addressed this second question, which is the current situation between the states of the U.S. and Israel. But basically, Israel is less reliant on the United States as an ally than it ever has been before. And that puts the United States in an interesting position because attitudes among the U.S. population are changing a lot on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And however, given the changes in the relationships between these two countries and how much Israel is less reliant on the U.S., that also means that the U.S. has less leverage in Israeli policy.
Okay, it's true, less reliant, less leverage, but still very reliant, even though it's less. You know what I mean?
No, but it is very important that we're seeing it like it's being diminished more than ever before.
Yes, but still very, very reliant. I'm not contradicting you. I'm agreeing with you that it's becoming less reliant, but still extremely reliant. Like that relationship is still very strong. Just because it's less reliant and before, that doesn't mean that it's not very high. I mean, it's harder to find two other countries that are this buddy. Anyways, but yeah, overall, I think we covered this pretty good. All right, next question.
Dolly also asked a question about a I'm just going to explain it, and I'll post part of it here. Basically, there is a new Egyptian banknote, meaning like a currency bill, that has a rainbow flag on it, and it's causing outrage because there's a rainbow, and they don't think that it's just a watermark. So if you guys live in a country where you have money that's a little bit reflective, like I looked at what the Egyptian banknote looks like. There's like a little building, and instead of it just being a depiction of the building, it actually reflects a little rainbow, to prove for counterfeit and stuff. And people are apparently freaking out. I think this might actually be fun to cover as a news story, but not this week.
Is this actually true? People are freaking out over rainbow?
Yeah, no, they had to actually issue statements to clarify that this isn't a gay thing.
There needs to be an Onion article. There needs to be an Onion article where there's an actual rainbow in Cairo, in Egypt, right? In the sky. And people are now angry at God because what does this mean? People want to know. People want to know, like, is God like pro-LGBT? Why is there a rainbow in the sky? This needs to be an Onion article.
That's so funny. Well, okay, so it reminds me of this incident that occurred a few years ago. I can't remember exactly where. I think it was maybe in Hungary, like an Eastern European nation, which is, I don't know what's going on in the Eastern European countries, but they are not as LGBT friendly in comparison to Western Europe. And there was like maybe like an art week, and there was a setup where they had above a square, like a town square, that the top of the street was covered in these umbrellas that looked like rainbows, and there was outrage because they were saying that this was LGBT propaganda and that this was like a gay thing, and it's, oh my gosh, like you're infecting us with the gay, but it wasn't. It was just like an art display. And my initial thought when I heard about this and this situation with the Egyptian banknote is that it's amazing how someone's biases can make them hate completely neutral stimulus. So like I think about how there are some men who are like have a very rigid idea of masculinity, and they like can't enjoy, they literally do not allow themselves to enjoy the smell of like a nice fragrant floral perfume because that's for women, and I'm not a woman, I'm not weak like a woman, so it's like you are so caught up in your own biases and hatred that you are literally not allowing yourself pleasure of the senses, because you have such a rigid idea of like in-group and out-group identity. Like it's a shame.
Well, maybe it just doesn't match their identity. Maybe they enjoy a masculine identity and that just doesn't match it. I'm not saying, I mean, for example, let's say, for example, I think you're being a little bit judgmental.
Do you get the point that I'm trying to make? That was just another example.
I know. But I'm just saying, if somebody is feminine and they all of a sudden be like, why don't you enjoy this masculine thing? People are like, oh, because it's okay if they don't. I think it's okay the other way around as well.
You're getting sidetracked. I'm talking about a visceral, like, knee-jerk reaction to something that is just a pleasurable experience because they strongly associate that with something that they like have been taught to hate. That's just what I'm getting at.
I just want to make sure. I know I made sidetrack, but I'm just defending my boys, okay? My masculine people out there. I'm just speaking up for them. If you like, I'm just wondering if Susanna is describing something else, right? But if you don't enjoy, floral stuff, or
then my comment wasn't directed towards you, anyways.
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that we're not shaming anybody for their taste. And I'm not saying you were saying that. I'm just wanted to make sure that we're like people didn't interpret it like that. Anyways, I think it's okay. It's okay. I'm just trying to clarify. Don't get upset. All right. Next question.
You didn't even talk about your reaction to the rainbow banknote.
It's just so ridiculous. I did. I talked about they should just be made fun of by telling them to get butthurt over actual rainbows now. That's my response. I mean, it's just ridiculous. All right, next question.
Okay, this next. Whoa, that's weird.
This is D is the last patron who asks.
Yes.
Who asked 2 questions, and then we go to the.
D asked, "Do you have any insight into the 10 charges of public disturbance recently leveled against Mubarak Bala? What does this mean?" I'm not familiar about this. I'm going to follow up with D for more information because I've actually earlier today I was like looking at following up on cases of atheist political prisoners. Like I was trying to find information about Sohail Arabi today, more updated, and so I'm going to have to follow up on this, and we'll cover it on the news because that's very important. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, D. And D also asked, it was recently reported that 24 Chadian soldiers were killed by jihadists. Is it possible to get Leo Igwe back on the stream to give us an update on Islamic terrorism in Africa? For those who are not aware, Leo Igwe is an amazing Nigerian atheist and humanist activist doing incredible work in West Africa, with a lot of emphasis on protecting people who are abused, severely abused because they're accused of witchcraft in particular, and a huge advocate in Mubarak Bala's case. When it comes to the Chadian soldiers killed by jihadists, I mean, this is just part of the ongoing conflict in the Sahel region that is extremely complicated. It's not exclusive to any particular country. It's, kind of where the Sahara Desert begins. And I don't know how much expertise Leo Igwe has on Islamic terrorism. I know he has a lot of knowledge about kind of religious influence in the law of the country and in the culture of a country, when it comes to both Christian and Muslim, and the terrorism and Islamism problem across the Sahel is much larger than just terrorism.
This is a different. Yes, you say terrorism because you're trying to not trigger YouTube's algorithm, but this is not even the same country, right?
No. Leo works in Nigeria, and he's done.
Yeah, Leo is an expert. Leo seems. I mean, unless D knows something that we don't about Leo. Sorry. It seems like we're treating all of Africa as if it's like just one place. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm being ignorant, but it just seems to me like somebody who's a humanist legal expert in Nigeria wouldn't be able to, just going to them because of some Islamic attack in a different African country. It just goes back to the idea of like treating Africa as if it's all the same thing.
Monolith.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't do that with other people. Like we don't, like for example, it's like if there's an attack, if it's an Islamic attack in France, do we go like, okay, let's go to this this is humanist guy in Germany, Belgium, I don't know, yeah, and it's like his expertise is not terrorism. He's like human rights lawyer, and he's
Well,
not even the same country, but it's Europe, I guess. Somehow, I don't know. It just feels like we do that with Africa more than we do that with other places. So, maybe unless D knows
definitely.
something that we don't, maybe D knows something that we don't. I don't know. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
just
I'm under the impression that Leo's expertise is
okay.
more in fighting superstition and promoting and educating critical thinking. He like literally made a textbook for it for school children.
So maybe yeah. And also, D is saying Nigeria has taken the brunt of jihadi attack. Yeah, but I think Nigeria is taking it from Boko Haram. Is this is this if this other one happened? Is also
There's
Boko
a
Haram?
portion of Nigeria that is in the Sahel.
Yeah, but the Chadian soldiers, were they killed by Boko Haram? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're relevant. One thing that I know that is probably true. I don't know. Somebody correct me on this, but a lot of these attacks increase in the Sahel ever since Libya fell, and all the guns from Gaddafi's administration was just released upon Africa, and that really increased a lot of the attacks. Correct
Well, it
me if
also
I'm wrong.
made the entire region extremely afraid of regime change.
Oh yeah.
The consequences of that regime change were just a huge butterfly effect.
Yes, exactly. Anyways, maybe actually, maybe we're wrong. Maybe Leo would be like, yes, I have. Here's my expert analysis on all of this. Maybe he's like, maybe if Leo would know a lot about this, it doesn't hurt to ask. We could ask him if we would be
I
interested.
mean, I
in that.
would honestly just love him back on regardless. He's so
Yeah.
inspirational. So if we
Um,
missed that was the end of patron questions.
Now live
If
chat
we missed
questions.
your questions earlier, please give them now because
Yes, repost your live
StreamYard-
chat questions because it's hard to scroll all the way back up.
well, and StreamYard will just cut us off at a certain point when we go back in the chat. Let's find. This is just kind of a funny question from Blank.
Let's focus on questions more than on comments. No,
I am in
just
an
questions.
expensive college, and the city I've moved to is crap. Do you have any tips for people in my situation? So I can relate. I don't know what about your city is so crappy. Is it crime? Is it how dirty it is? Is it the amenities? Is it I mean, it could be any number of things. I think I know who this is, and I think I know where you're living. I don't know. It's complicated. Like, do you want to know how to make it less expensive to live in that city? Do you want to know like how to survive? Like, it's tough. Mind your business, first of all. When you're in a city like this, you mind your business. You see someone screaming their head off on the bus, mind your business. You pretend like it's just literally not even there. Get your phone out and just pretend like it's not happening. I don't make eye contact with people on the street. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say this for me, but if I have Wi-Fi, I don't really care what city I'm in. I mean, I have the entire world on my goddamn phone. Who cares what's happening? I mean, I do need outside only for like to see a tree and a flower in the sky sometimes.
Get some vitamin D.
No, I just need maybe a little bit of nature, but who cares about anything else? Again, I know I'm saying this for myself. I'm not making like I know that this comes off for a lot of people like, you know, Armin, why are you saying this about me? I'm living in a place where my rights are not being respected and people are bullying me. I'm not talking about those situations, okay? I'm just talking about myself, right? I'm not talking about anyone else's struggles that they're going through, okay? I just feel like it doesn't really matter. I have access to the past. I have access to the written words of 1,000 great thinkers from around the world that have come before me. I have access to their greatest works. I have access to lectures. I have access to the best entertainment the history of mankind has ever experienced, the free entertainment that is just available to me on YouTube is entertainment that like the richest men in the world would be able to see, just like not even like once every 5 years they would be able to see a great play in the city center, and it wasn't a fraction of the level of entertainment that I'm getting with no money at all, just sitting in my living room being air conditioned. Like, things are good, okay? Things are really good, okay? I mean, I have access to cold water and hot water when I want it. I have access to, heat and air conditioning. I have food. I mean, come on, guys. It's like, it's not that bad. It's like, it's things are good. I have books. I have, it's just like, I get to talk to you guys. I get to hang out with Suze every day. Things are great. Things are awesome. And the fact that we have the internet means that the people who are living in your city are not as, I mean, it still would be nice if you have people around you to be people that you could relate to, but it matters less than before. Okay, I'm not saying it doesn't matter at all, but it matters less than before.
Yeah.
Here, just I mean, I'm just gonna say this cliche thing, okay? But I know it's cliche, okay? And just focus on the good things. Think about, sometimes life becomes so much more pleasant if you just, sometimes, not always. I know your situation might be very different and things suck for some of you, okay? But some of us could significantly improve our lives just by looking at things differently. Some of us, okay? I'm not dismissing people who are struggling hard, okay? But anyways,
well, I know a lot of people like come from outside of America and then they go to these like, very famous cities, and it's a huge wake-up call. It is a huge wake-up call because it is not what it looked like in Hollywood. It's not what it looks like on TV. And that can be really difficult for some people. Keep your wits about you when you're on a street. Be aware of your surroundings. And you will honestly become desensitized to it shockingly quickly. You won't even, stuff that really bothered you and shocked you and appalled you before, you'll be amazing how quickly you adapt to it. James SC didn't have a question. He just has like a manifesto in the live chat, so I don't even like know how to get into all this.
Just focus on questions only.
Okay, well, people aren't asking new questions. I'm gonna have to go find some.
People were complaining that we're not asking their questions and we were asking Patreon questions. We told you. There are a lot of questions that are just hidden among all this goddamn comments. James SC is making sure that we don't find all of them. I'm just gonna mute James SC for a while so it's easier for us to, like, he just posted a whole bunch of stuff. Guys, repost your questions. Oh my god, these are just comments.
So Shuaib is asking your thoughts on Apostate Prophet's performance on the Thought Adventure podcast and his dismissive attitude to philosophy as a bunch of irrelevant rhetoric. So to be honest, I haven't seen this, so I can't give an accurate review of this particular performance. I have talked to Apostate Prophet about philosophy before, and so I can kind of harken back to that conversation. I don't know exactly what he said here. My remarks might be inaccurate, but I think He shares a somewhat similar frustration that I have with philosophy, which is like, I don't find it always relevant. I find it very esoteric. I find it too abstract, and it's fun. It's very interesting and important to have these conversations, but I think it doesn't always acknowledge the reality of how messy and muddy the human experience is. There are so many factors that go into meeting our biopsychosocial needs that aren't accounted for in philosophical thought. Like, we're not these little things that can just become these little moral perfect creatures. We are driven by like biochemical reactions that can go really haywire, and it's not as simple as just saying, well, this and this action is the most moral and it causes the least suffering, and we should just all be doing that, because there are so many material conditions that just get in the way of actually achieving those goals. So I get very frustrated in philosophical discussions when it heads too much in that direction and isn't considering the dirty reality of our world. And at that point is when I tend to kind of tune out, because I just find it somewhat irrelevant. That doesn't mean I don't think that it is an important endeavor. It is very good to mull over these ideas, check what we're doing, reconsider our processes. But at the end of the day, like, you need to be more driven towards the driven by the data of what is actually observed. Does that make sense, Armin?
Yeah, but I think it all depends on what you mean by philosophy. And what, we could just refer to what most people think of when they talk about philosophy. But if you want to be more general, any contemplation about anything would be philosophy. I mean, the idea of, by the way, we don't know if if AP is being represented accurately here or not. So we're just like, we have no, I mean, I didn't watch the listen to the podcast, right? But the idea of saying that philosophy is a bunch of irrelevant rhetoric, that's a philosophical statement, right? So, I mean, if you want to be very general about what philosophy means, just making that claim, it's also taking part in philosophy. I think the part of philosophy where a lot of people have, in my view, accurately deemed useless is the metaphysical part, right? I think that is the part of philosophy where we have come to an understanding now that it's fun sometimes to think about what is the nature of reality and how do we know it. But we have answers to those things when it comes to finding models that reflect reality. We have methods to come up with answers, usually referred to as the scientific method, where it doesn't involve people just reflecting on the world to come up with answers to those questions. You know what I mean? Like, we have superior methods to that. However, when it comes to metaphysical questions, I think like we have to retire philosophy. But does that mean that we have to get rid of philosophy as a whole? That would be impossible, because at the end of the day, you have to reflect on things. So here's the thing. You could also say that when it comes to reflecting on things, we now have branches for reflection on things that are more specific to what you're reflecting on, right? So, for example, we don't need philosophers anymore, because if you're talking about psychology, we have psychologists now. When you're talking about society, we have sociologists now. When you want to talk about economy, we have economy now. When you want to talk about reality and understanding, how do we have knowledge of reality? We have science now, right? But then then we don't need this separate branch. People could say like that is philosophy, that is just there for contemplation, right? So I still do think there's some utility in looking at how people used to consider different ideas, the history of it, and even if they were wrong, why they were wrong, right? And also within these, I still think that you could have science and then you could have the philosophy of science, right? So science could do its thing, but then the mere explanation for why we do science and why this scientific method is a superior way. Some people say you don't need the explanation because it will win because it works. That's Stephen Hawking's perspective, is like science will win because it works. You don't need to. There's nothing else that you need. However, for humans, unfortunately, stuff working is not enough. You actually need to sell it to them, and to be able to explain things, to be able to reflect on why we do certain things, you do need to contemplate on it, and that will be doing philosophy. So you could have science and you could have the philosophy of science, where it explains why the scientific method is the superior method. By the way, I explained all of these in a lot more detail in a video I recently did on my own personal channel called The Problem with Philosophy. If you search for Armin Navabi, The Problem with Philosophy, you could see all of that coming up. Some of the current uses for philosophy, I think, is to sell the scientific method, is to explain why the scientific method is a superior method, right? You also need philosophy. You need philosophical skills to be able to fight bad philosophy, right? To be able to understand why Hegel was full of crap, why Kant was full of crap, why Aristotelian way of looking at things is outdated, and why Plato was wrong. Why even Hume, who I love, was wrong. Karl Popper was definitely answer to the why we trust the scientific method was a perfect answer to the Hume's radical skepticism. So basically, to fight off bad philosophy and explain why it's wrong, you could do some philosophy. That's a good thing to do. But overall, I think if you have to choose between learning philosophy or learning a more new, superior way of thinking properly, which is like the learning logical fallacies and understanding how to basically informal logic, right? Informal logic is a lot more helpful has a lot more utility in you being able to reason more properly. It doesn't give you as direct and decisive answers as the way answers as philosophers have came up with. A lot of philosophy also, by the way, if you actually know how to think properly and simplify things and look at the core of what different claims are getting at, then you also realize that a lot of history of philosophy were people just dressing up very simple nonsensical claims with very heavy, complicated words and systems, where made it seem a lot more intelligent and sophisticated than they actually were. It was just basically certain claims without evidence, but it was dressed up with this very elaborate system and with very heavy language that made it seem very impressive. But at the end of it, when you clean all of that mess off of it and then look at the actual claim, you look at it like, okay, well, that's ridiculous. Okay, this is your claim. Do you have any reason to believe in this claim? And you realize, no, it's just people making full of crap, making claims without nothing to back it up, and just the internal consistency of it seems to be enough for it to just for them to believe that it's correct, right? But when it comes to, for example, the scientific method, like none of it is verifiable, right? None of these claims of a lot of these philosophers in history were verifiable. You know, the internal consistency of it means for a lot of these philosophers made it seem like that should be enough for you to believe that this is a good system to accept. But if you look at the scientific method, it has internal consistency and two other things that makes it a lot more easy to accept, right? So it has, like, the scientific method, the models that it comes up with when it comes to explaining the world is internally consistent, right? So that means when it's internally consistent means the models are not contradicting each other. That means that it has explanatory power, right? But it has two other things that these other philosophers don't have, right? It has predictive power, right? It has predictive power, and it also have manipulative power. Manipulative power means that it has means the power of technology, right? So basically, what you understand is, like, because of these three things, you understand that what the scientific method is giving us must be reflecting something about reality. Not reality as it is, because that's impossible, but something about it, it is hooked into reality somehow, right? Or else we wouldn't be able to land on the moon. I mean, Stephen Hawking said it better than anyone else, like, science will win because it works, right? I mean, the fact that it works means that we have uncovered some secrets about how everything is. Anyways, I think I explained too long.
I actually have a hard stop right now.
Oh, okay. Really? Okay. Can you do one more question? No. Hard stop.
No.
You know that. Okay. All right. Sorry, I didn't know that we have a hard stop at 1 hour, because I would have given a shorter answer.
Sorry.
Yeah. All right. I will do more live streams at different hours on my own personal channel. So subscribe to my personal channel, Armin Navabi, for more Q&As. I usually go on for longer, maybe like sometimes even 2 hours. So follow me there, and also subscribe to our newsletter. And also, if you want to make sure that your answers are questions, your questions are answered, please consider, unless you're oh, Armin noticed me, senpai. Hey, I noticed you. Please make sure that you do not support us financially if you're struggling financially. If you are struggling financially and you're considering supporting us financially, then you are being an idiot. Stop it. Cut it out right now. Do not do that. Do not do that. If you want to support us and you're struggling financially, please just like this video. Just like, that doesn't cost you anything, and share this video. That really helps. Subscribe to our channel. Recommend other people to subscribe to our channel, Atheist Republic. But if you are not struggling financially, you could become a patron for $1 a day, and this way,
as little as $1 a month.
A month. What I'm saying, not $1 a day. $1 a month. That's a lot. That's not $1 a day. I can't speak right now. But and then what? Yeah,
I'm drunk.
You get all our blasphemous art for free, which is you should be very grateful to get all that sexy art, the nude version, not the censored version, for just $1 a month. But you also get to ask your questions, and we'll make sure we answer them
first
in priority. First. All right, guys. Susanna has a hard stop, and I'm like not letting her go, so I'm gonna go before she gets angry. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your questions. Sorry we didn't get to more questions, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.